today on Locked On Texas Tech. Clowns to the left, jokers to the right. Big 12 in the middle saying, burn, baby, burn.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen every day on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Today's episode brought to you by Birddogs. Birddog 'em. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege, and when you enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, they're going to throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti style tumbler with every order. One that I can hide from the wife after I've lost all of hers. You can see it right here on YouTube. Beautiful with that magnetic slide top, just like you like it. With and the only Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
They sent you stuff.
That's right. Yeah, did you get a care package?
They sent me stuff. The stuff is awesome. It's awesome.
That's right.
Yeah,
Bird Dogs. We'll have more on what the stuff is looking like coming up in just a bit, but birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. Family appropriate. That came out with a little weird phrasing. That voice you hear is the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. And Chris, today kicking off the episode with something that is always a front burner topic, it seems like, any time of year, and that is the shuffling on the deck of college sports. Realignment, and something interesting happening really over the last handful of days, I guess I would say, Chris, with some reporting out there that has kind of shifted, I think, at least speaking personally as a fan of a Big 12 institution, my attention from the West Coast now to the East Coast, because it actually seems like the rumblings within ACC country where they are hamstrung, and I mean to the biggest degree you could be hamstrung by a media rights deal, and the anxiousness growing for them, obviously, in that league. As an example, Florida State doesn't want to make less money than Central Florida. That's what's about to happen. So if you're talking about dissolution of Pac-12, strengthening of the Big 12, it actually may be spurred on to some end by what happens in the ACC, right? How are you seeing these things shape out?
Yeah, there's a lot of conversations that have taken place, or articles that have been written this week, and then I think once the Ross Dellinger's initial article came out, there's various things that kind of spun off of that. I think that there's some takeaways and there's some layers to this stuff, and I have a question for you kind of when we get into this, because that's really the question that needs to be asked is really kind of the main thing. And, there was an old saying about keep the main thing the main thing. Well, because I think sometimes we lose sight of this when we start talking about some of these other things, like the ACC, for example. But I think that my takeaways from reading some of this stuff, which, again, some of it we kind of knew, it's not a matter of when. Well, hold on. It's not a matter of if; it's a matter of when. On the next layer or movement. Yeah, I got a dyslexic moment there with my saying, or I got out of order there. So there's a next wave, and with the ACC talk, there may be a next wave, down the line as well. But the main takeaways here were Big 12, Pac-12, and there was some new info that I think we kind of were somewhat privy to. And I think what the ground – look, Brett Yormark has been very clear. He said it and shouted it from the mountaintop. Look, we're looking to make a move. We want to get into this extra time zone. We want – that we're not done here. We're looking to expand. We're looking to thinking big picture. And we've mentioned some of this stuff about UNLV before. We've mentioned, what I did note, though, is that you read all this whole article, there's not one mention of Gonzaga in there. I thought that was kind of fascinating, so we'll file that one away. Yep. But we're introduced to Memphis. We're introduced to UConn. I think there's some San Diego State discussion that has taken place, which we kind of knew that may be more of a fit for the Pac-12. But something is going to happen. And I think you're in the between now and and July 1st is when something happens, and I'll tell you why. Because San Diego State, for all intents and purposes, they don't have to, but it would really behoove them to make a decision on what their future holds and get that announced prior to, I believe it's July 1st. Otherwise, their exit fee, I think it triples or quadruples. And so if you're the Pac-12, you're trying to get a media rights deal done, right? But I think part of that is like, yeah, you want to invite San Diego State. Maybe you need to get the deal done before that, and you can't really do that, or you can't really invite San Diego State until you get that done. So there's some moving parts there. And then, oh, by the way, the Big 12 is just sitting here ready to pounce. And would Colorado just say, you know what, we're tired of waiting. We got a bird in the hand over here. Big 12's offered us this. Let's do it. There's a lot going on here. And the ACC has entered the chat, though. Yes.
Yeah, I thought some of what you were touching on there was really interesting as far as maybe things that you hadn't seen in print, because some of this stuff sometimes just goes from like Twitter conversation or message board conversation, and you see it and you're thinking, oh, yeah, that might make some sense, I guess. But then documented, via reputable reporting or guys that are actually going on record to speak about such things. One of the other things I thought from a Pac-12 perspective that I've seen, obviously it's not brand new. You like see some of this out there, but I just couldn't fathom they could be this dense. But Chris, there's like Pac-12 sources from these meetings reporting, on record, who are basically going out and saying, yeah, we're open to expansion. Like San Diego State, SMU seem like great options. And I'm thinking, wait, that was a real thing? You're still on that road? Like, you're dead men walking if that's actually still something that you're considering to be, anything but a finger in the dam. And so whenever you see, like, whatever these little nuggets may be that are out there scattered among, I try to figure out, okay, which one of these is, kind of the straw that would break that camel's back. And you have to go back to financial incentive every time. Follow the money. And so clearly you're thinking about, or at least I have been thinking about, in the case of looking out west of the Pac-12, programs like Oregon and Washington, thoughts of unequal revenue distribution and things like that. And of course, what started it all was an untenable situation for USC, where they're making as much for their third tier rights as maybe Oklahoma State or Texas Tech in some years. That's not tenable for them as they view themselves. But then you see the same thing in the ACC. Follow the money. Who's got the biggest, motivation? And it is something I already mentioned, but something that is so glaring. It's kind of wild to consider the landscape in the state of Florida right now, as you've got the vaunted Florida State Seminoles, set up in a spot where they are trailing, financially speaking, Central Florida all of a sudden because the timing of these contract rights. And I think, there's like some thought of like, well, we want to be at this table. We want to be in this group, sure, so we're really motivated to make that happen. But what really gets wheels turning? Cash or lack thereof. So breaking grant of rights, paying out X as far as penalties for breaking those things, attorneys being involved. That's all easily digestible and justifiable, I think, in those minds who know already we're losing money by doing nothing. Like, maybe there is this big rock we got to push up the hill to break these things and get where we need to be. And there is a consequence. That's a cost, obviously. But the cost of doing nothing is greater. So I really feel like, some of the things you see reported with Oregon, Washington, or the Magnificent Seven, so to speak. And I was curious to kind of get your thoughts on some of that specific reporting about this group in the ACC led by, programs like Florida State. I think North Carolina would be high on that list as well, who are going to be sitting here saying, dog, it's a no for me, dog. Jim Phillips, whoever signed this deal. I don't know whose fault it was, but we can't keep doing this. Every day that goes by, we're losing ground. And again, it's based financially, but that speaks to all other areas. You're losing ground in this competitive industry you're in, known as college sports. So that really gets my attention. It's not just like, oh, we want to shore up some things, or we'd rather be in this group, or we feel like culturally or geographically, this is a better fit. Hell no. I mean, those things are interesting to consider, but it's when the money is being lost that I think you really could see some wheels turning. So that really got my attention. The Magnificent Seven riding into town, whooping and a whomping, Chris. And I guess Florida State gets to be Yul Brynner. I know that's a lot to consider. What a mouthful.
Yeah, so that's one of the big takeaways from this piece was.
But first, today's episode brought to you by Birddogs. You're going to look good. You're going to feel great in Birddogs. I don't even wear shorts, but I wear Birddogs. And no longer do I look like I'm riding a chicken like my old man used to accuse me of back in the day when I had no Birddog shorts. These are versatile, available for all activities, lounging, golfing, grilling while you're lounging. Check them out at birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and enter the promo code when you're there, Locked On College. They're going to throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti style tumbler with every order. Look good, feel great. Do it today with our friends at Birddogs. Head on over again to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and be sure to enter in the promo code Locked On College to get that free custom Birddogs tumbler with every order from our friends at Birddogs.
So that's one of the big takeaways from this piece was just the ACC schools are pissed, and I you know, I mean, just to sum it up, I think they've been pissed. I mean, I think that they took a deal and they traded the ability to pivot or the ability to get back to the table quickly for long-term financial security. Yep. And I think that, you know, they got their own channel, you know, they got the ACC network and ESPN was like, you know, but I think they left a lot on the table. And I think I mean, this is one of the worst deals in all of sports. And whether it's, it just is. I mean, you know, and
Roller Derby on ESPN 8 has a better deal than the ACC.
It is one of the worst agreements, like for player or coach or team or whatever. And I mean, because think about it. They are threatening to tear it up and threatening to walk. There's still 13 years left on this deal. That's how bad this deal is. They're like, I want to renegotiate a deal that's not even up for 13 years.
Who was their agent, Master P?
Yeah, it's just, you know, I think that there was a period of where you know, people were scared. People were like seeing kind of the shift going on, and it's like, please don't pull the rug out, man. If I can be a part of the network, and you're going to give me a long-term deal, and I'm going to remain Power 5 league and all that, yes, please let me sign. You know, I'll sign my name and you fill out the rest, and they clearly did. But
right, I mean, you don't want to read it. You don't want to read it. No, we're good. We're good.
But I mean, yeah, and it's Florida State and Clemson. I think they have the most stroke in that situation. I think North Carolina basketball, you know, the brand there has some stroke, but. Just to give you an idea, and I can't speak to how the ACC grant of rights is written, but let's just localize it and look at the Big 12 situation. If grant of rights agreements were easy to break, or if you could kind of, you know, hey man, please don't take this seriously. I want to walk away. You know, whatever. If there was any flimsy aspect of it at all, Oklahoma and Texas would have been out of this league 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 1 year ago. Yeah. But I mean, I think that is a pretty ironclad agreement. And again, you kind of read that there's, you know, ACC folks that are kind of looking into that to try to figure out how viable it may be to kind of break it or break away. Maybe we create our own little league here. You know, and I don't know. I mean, because it's like, that contract states we have every broadcasting right of yours through this time frame, and then we get to go sell it and do with it what we want to. We can start it at this time. We get to put these announcers on it, and we get to put it on this channel. And it's, you know, and we've got this network that we own your content. You took the check. We own your content, and so now, you know, it's like, you know, Florida State and Clemson and everybody's saying time out. You know, I don't want to do this. This goes back to the Pac-12. I think one of the other takeaways in this piece was that, and this seems realistic, it does, if the Pac-12 were to come to an agreement, what you're starting to see now and sense is if there is an agreement to be made, and I'm not necessarily convinced that there is, it will be short term. We're talking, 2 to 6 years. I think that was termed 4 to 6 in the agreement, because what you won't see is you won't see a long-term pen to paper grant of rights agreement if they do come up with a short-term deal. It'll be, they're going to kind of limp along here. They're going to kind of kick the can down the road. And we're relevant now, but again, people are waiting to pounce. They're going to just basically kick the can down the road and say, hopefully we can outlive this next wave, and then we'll wait for the next wave to come whenever these things change. So
which ain't no way to live, is it?
It would be tricky, and this is what the Big 12 operated in, and we know the public relations damage that it did to this league for a period of time when you were just kind of the butt end of a joke. You were, and people knew, hey, weakest league. We're just waiting for it to falter. And you had members leave. You had Colorado leave and Missouri leave and Nebraska leave and A&M leave. Now Oklahoma and Texas have left and all that. But you're still standing, and you've got a long-term agreement now. But I think that's what the Pac-12 is, and as a short-term deal, is Oregon and Washington cool with that. The other thing is, it doesn't sound like based on what was in this piece, it doesn't sound like the Big Ten is just knocking down the door for Oregon and Washington. Hey, we would have loved to take it if the money's right. And guess what? As it was reported in the piece, money's not there. So would they take a half share, a 3/4 share to still go to the Big Ten? Because maybe that share is bigger than what they would be getting in the Pac-12 on a new agreement. So there's a lot to process here. And at some point, though, Calvin, I have a question for you that I want you to react to, because when it was posed to me, I'm like, man, you know what? I hadn't thought about this like that. And I think really that's the only reason we're talking about it anyway. But I think I'd love to hear your answer.
Lay it on me. You're clear for approach.
So as all these realignment discussions, here we've sat here and talked about the ACC. You got this subset nicknamed 7 teams. We got Pac-12 going on. We know the rumored 4 corners. Oregon and Washington are kind of doing their thing. The Big Ten is involved. Now I mentioned to you Gonzaga has been an option, but now UConn and Memphis and UNLV. There's just a lot of possibilities here. At the end of the day, and this is really what I care about, and I think you do too. At the end of the day, what's best for Texas Tech? What's the best realistic possible outcome for Texas Tech when kind of the dust settles? And I say realistic because, best case would be, hey, will you go to the SEC? Not happening. Or you go to the Big Ten? Not happening. Okay, so let's play in the real playground here. Of all the things that we're talking about, what's the best outcome for Texas Tech in your opinion?
I think an amalgamation of the best of the rest from the Pac-12, and I would now say the ACC possibly, because one thing I thought about in the consolidation of power in the SEC and the Big Ten, and people were like, oh, no, they're going to have a breakaway civilization. They're going to live on Mars or something. We're never going to be able to even be within reach again. Not true, because you're still going to have roughly, 2/3 of major college football fan bases and programs and athletics departments left out of that group. You're not going to run away from that. That includes Texas Tech. I view Texas Tech somewhere as a top, what I think should be a top 35 athletics department in all capacities, all measurables, all rankings, pretty much year in and year out. So are you at the elite of the elite table? No. But are you far away from it? No, I don't think so. And there are a lot of other programs that could fit that profile, or even a little worse, Chris, and still be within a relevant landscape of what I consider to be about 65 to 80 programs in the country. And so I think best case is, Florida State, Clemson, Oregon, Washington, I don't know, Virginia, some of you uppities on the East Coast, I don't even think about like that, but you think about yourselves a lot in that way. Go consolidate, I guess, do whatever you want, but there's still going to be some collection of roughly I don't know, 20, 30 programs, I think, that have incredible fan interest, tremendous resource, history, competitive motivation, et cetera, that are going to be out there. And again, Texas Tech is going to be in that group. I don't know if they were foolish or just something that had to happen at that time. I regret some of what you've added to your conference to this point, namely Cincinnati. And I think Houston, maybe UCF. I don't know. BYU seems like a logical addition for anybody, but the best case and now possibly most realistic is, yeah, the destruction of the ACC and the Pac-12, at least as we know them. And then some of those that we know have some meat to them being in the same group that Texas Tech is in, still with a path to the playoff, still with lucrative and findable television agreements. You're not going to be on gas pumps, and such is life. It's not going to be like it's always been, and maybe not as good. I don't know, but it could still be great because it's still major college sports. So I'm not even sure what that number looks like. That could just be like a 20-team Big 12 at this point, where you're adding some from the West, and maybe there's somebody out East that wants to lend an ear now. You know, I don't know, North Carolina State's, Virginia Tech's, Miami. I don't know, but I'd say that's best case, and now possibly also realistic case in some ways for the Red Raiders. But you're still going to be in the group that you've essentially been in. That's the third best or most relevant group of college football programs, because for whatever butt of the joke the Big 12 might have been within national media narratives, numbers didn't say that. Turnstile numbers, member institution revenue numbers, television numbers, deeper than the ACC or the Pac-12. So you've been in that third spot, you know, essentially all along. Again, speaking about Texas Tech, I think you have a great chance to remain there, and hopefully you'll make the best of it. But that'd be my answer now. I guess it's improved a little bit more, the possibilities, because of the crumble of the ACC that seems like it could be out there. So plucking a little from left and right would be my best case scenario.
Yeah, because essentially what I hear you saying is that, see, the best outcome for Texas Tech, in my opinion, is that you're looking to check a couple of boxes here, and you've described ways to kind of check some of those boxes. But you want to be like financially relevant / stable. Like, in other words, you want to be around enough folks that are worth enough money to where you are nationally relevant, right? And to where you can fund, you know, facilities and coaching salaries and kind of play ball at the highest level. We all know that the Big Ten and the SEC have kind of put that a bit out of reach as far as like matching up with them. I say a little bit out of reach. In some ways it's a lot, but there's nothing wrong with being like the next tier. And I think that, so, you know, I think you want to be with a league that is stable and there's enough of a group that you're with to where it's worth something. I think as it relates to the best possible outcome for Texas Tech specifically, I really like, I can't get too fired up about even some of the ACC schools like on the East Coast. I can't get too fired up about UConn. I can't get too fired up. I mean, no. I'll listen to Vegas. I'll listen to some of this, but I know that's an outside the box, and that Yormark is looking at that. Brett Yormark is from a different perspective. That's big picture. That's thinking outside the box. That's trying to own a media market much more than an institution that is just really crushing it right now. But see, to me, that's why the Arizona schools, like Colorado, that still makes so much sense, because what you have is you have regional potential rivalries. Doesn't mean that they're rivals. Doesn't mean that they're going to be rivals of yours, but they're close proximity. They're Power 5 schools, you know, like the whole air quote type. I mean, these are Power 5 schools, and they're, yeah, you know, like you're not building any kind of rivalry with UCF or Cincinnati. Yeah, Houston, you could. But I still think of all the moving parts here, you know, that it really behooves any of those 4 schools. And I would listen to Oregon and Washington talk, just because they are as blue blood as you're going to get. That's not necessarily in the blue blood category, if that makes sense. Those brands are big. Not enough for the Big Ten to want them and to break the bank, or not enough. Yeah, not enough for the TV folks to say, we identify these as blue bloods, and so we're going to back up the truck, and the money is there. But I think that collection of schools, because again, it's proximity. I think they're clearly worth something, which is why Brett Yormark has said, these are the four that we've identified. So of all the different options, I still think that is best for Texas Tech in some semblance of it. It doesn't need to be
those.
Yeah.
What you're describing there is the same thing I'm describing from the ACC. It's just these are programs you're not giving a hand up necessarily.
Yeah.
You're bringing in. It's not UConn. It's not Houston. It's not Cincinnati.
Right,
it's not UNLV. It's not San Diego State. Miss me with all of that.
Yeah.
You should pursue this until you can't anymore. Get to 20. Pluck your four corners from the Pac-12 and go for whatever in the ACC. Louisville should have already been a Big 12 school. That's the example I should have mentioned. I don't know
almost were.
Louisville
Years
should
ago.
have already been a Big 12 school. And find three others that want to ride. Pitt, you want to come hate West Virginia in the conference? You want to saddle up? That's fine. Miami, Boston, I don't care. Not Boston College. I was about to say Boston College. You're not invited, Boston College. But that's the general theme I have right now is there are still options where you're not giving somebody a hand up. Maybe you're saving them from a sinking ship, but it's not like there's some, impoverished program out there or whatever. Their ship just sucked, I guess. And maybe it ran into a kraken or something. I don't really know. But that's what I would love to see happen is not the hand up, but equal or even in some ways financially superior programs. Like that seems like a pipe dream in a lot of ways, but maybe it's not so much right now. But I'm just excited also to think about some of these Southern lawyers getting involved with the ACC and what, sir, I implore you, sir, and like some Colonel Sanders style suits, seersuckers, things like that. Hopefully no Buster Murdochs. I'll keep the Murdochs out of this. But either way, there are so many freaking moving parts, and so much of it will be played out in boardrooms and maybe courtrooms to some extent, Chris. But you've still got a chance here to solidify what zone I think you've inhabited all along, which is not the Big Ten or the SEC, but still at the table of relevant college football. And by the way, I want to go back also, because when I talk about like 65 to 80 programs that I think are relevant on the landscape of their fans' care, they've got some resource, they're not subsidizing their program by other games necessarily. That doesn't suggest to you that like everyone is behind the Big Ten and the SEC. Rutgers, Indiana, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, Ole Miss. Like, no, there are several outside of those two leagues who are lapping those programs. So there's just far too much value, interest, and relevancy across the landscape of roughly 65 to 80. That's roughly Power 5, what we formerly considered Power 5, to like feel like they're going to get shut out in the dark. And I guess the best news for all of us that are not fans of those in the Big Ten or the SEC that are wondering where you're going to wind up within some recent history was when we got the Pac-12, the expanded playoff instituted, Chris, and there was a path to the playoff for those who are going to be in whatever this looks like on the outside of the Big Ten and the SEC. And that's the best thing you could have asked for. Really, if you knew you weren't going to be at that table, do we have a road to the playoff table? And you do. So I think there are some sunny days on the horizon for programs like Texas Tech or fans of those who are a little bit uncertain right now. But I don't necessarily know what there is for Wake Forest or Washington State. Many of us have gotten reality checks, right, during this time. And some more will be there to come. And we'll be here on Locked On Texas Tech, obviously, to take it all in with you. So thanks for making us your first listen every day on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Once again, apologies for the delayed launch today. And I know it makes it hard on you when we're talking first listen, but yes, you're thinking right. You should not be watching or consuming any other content until you've seen Locked On Texas Tech for the day. We appreciate those of you who are doing that, man. Chris, enjoyed it as always. Thanks for the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Big 12 leaders meeting at the end of this month. A lot to decide fairly soon, but always fun talking realignment. Change is in the air. Just don't know exactly when. But something's going to happen here, and we'll be here for it. But keep hope alive, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Only thing that stays the same is that everything changes. Everything changes. Thanks, Chris, and thanks to you out there for being there every day. YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts, also available on the SiriusXM app. That's SXM in the App Store. For Chris, I'm Casey. We'll see you for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.